Last of what was to be a 4-session turned into 5-session on religion and conflict. And this evening, what I'd like to do is take you to Fantasyland, also known as North Korea. But if you do not have a rubber band on your left wrist, please go get one and put it on your left wrist. I ask you to wear this just as a little subtle reminder, or give you a little bit of an emotional feel for what it's like to live in a country like North Korea, where every citizen, by law, must wear a lapel pin. And on the lapel pin is a little North Korean flag with a picture of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-il. Oh. It is not optional. Don't wear it, you may wind up in jail. Oh, what's worse, your whole family may wind up in jail for life, depending on the situation.
So this is our Pastor Larry rubber band.
Yeah, this is
And if they don't have it on, what would you do to it?
Nothing. In fact, if you want, take it off now. But I would encourage you to leave it on as just a reminder. That works, right? You told me that's a good psychological technique?
Obsessive compulsive disorder, you start getting...
Yep. But this is an interesting country. When the dear leader, Kim Jong-il, second in line, was born on, according to the North Koreans, on Mount Paektu, the highest mountain in Korea and Manchuria, long revered by Koreans as sacred, and the birthplace of their nation in 1942. Unbelievers say he was born in 1941 in Siberia, in the Soviet Union. His birth in a humble log cabin brought joy to the cosmos. A double rainbow appeared over the peak, a new star rose in the heavens, and a swallow descended to herald his birth. You get the idea.
No shepherds and cattle?
Now, I'm sorry? I missed it.
no shepherds?
He forgot them. Now, how did it come about that a socialist republic established by a Marxist-Leninist party in 1948 winds up with a state religion and its own mythology? That is what North Korea is about. And here, more than any of the ones we've looked at, I think religion, in its broader meaning, plays a role. If you try to understand North Korea as a communist nation, you will never understand it. In fact, all references to Marxism and Leninism were omitted from the 2009 Constitution, replaced with Juche, which is Kim Il-sung's homegrown version of self-reliance. It would be incorrect to call them a communist nation at this point. Scholars debate on what this hermit kingdom that prides itself on telling the rest of the world nothing about itself is. There's a matter of debate. Whether it is a dictatorship in the classic sense, or monarchy in the classic sense, in communist or leftist clothes, or its own unique religion, Kim Jong-il-ism. But this is a state that thinks nothing of not mentioning whether the current leader is married or not. Don't know. Nothing official. Children, your guess is as good as mine. They share nothing. And that's part of what makes this, that's part of why most of the world calls it the hermit kingdom, and why it's an interesting place to be, and a very unfortunate place if you live there. This is North Korea proper. It shows the political divisions in the country. If you look right up here, there's a border with Russia, China all along through here, and then down here is the DMZ with South Korea. Very mountainous, especially in this part through here. Very mountainous. There is somewhat of a plain in this area, but this is an area that can, they can find iron ore, you can do coal, products that come out of the mountains. Agricultural is more of a problem. Okay. Little bit of history. I did hand out a timeline. It was from a BBC website. Just a condensed version of it, basically. This is from 1900. At this point, Korea is an independent nation. You'll notice the little dotted line, and you see the Russian Empire to the north. You see British India. You see what is now Thailand, then called Siam, an independent nation. And you see the two French colonies of French Indochina. This was all British colonies, all through here. Afghanistan was a neutral area. It was designed to be a buffer between the Russian and the British Empire so that they would not go to war over Asia. They thought it'd be better if we just put this buffer in the middle, and the Afghans are impossible to rule anyway, so let's just leave them to their own devices, and that way we don't get into a conflict. That was the origin of Afghanistan as we know it today. Japan, separate country, 1900. However, Korea is under the influence of China. It, along with Tibet, along with Mongolia, are considered part of the Chinese Empire because the Korean leader had to give deference to the Mongol emperor. That changed very quickly. By 1910, Japanese occupation. A couple of little wars going on. China had to give up all interest in Korea. Japanese troops occupied Korea and then annexed it in 1910. So increasingly, from 1910 to 1945, it was illegal to speak Korean. It was illegal to write in Korean. You had to use your Japanese name, not your Korean name. And there was the most brutal attempt to eliminate all culture, all Korean culture. The Japanese Empire tried to turn Korea into Little Japan. Did not work. But not for lack of trying. In fact, it got so far that at given times, periodically, you would have to go to a certain place, and there would be a picture of the Japanese emperor, and you would have to go and ritually bow to the picture of the emperor to acknowledge him as your master. Acknowledge him as the rightful Lord. Now, I think we know what happened in World War II. I hope. Korea becomes independent with a Soviet zone in the north and an American occupied zone in the south, which led to, whoop, that's good, Lara, let's just, come on back here. Come on back here. What we have today. Anyway, just to go through the history fairly quickly, both sides were occupied at first, and the Soviets pulled most of their forces out, and pulled all their forces out in 1948. We pulled out just about all of our forces in 49. And Kim Il-sung, the leader of the North, sees an opportunity. Because at this point in time, the North is far stronger than the South, militarily and economically. This was the industrial heartland of Korea. This was more of an agricultural area due to the changed geography. The mountains aren't as high here. You've got more of a coastal plain for agriculture. Go to South Korea today, you'll see every square inch of arable land being used for grow something. It is incredible. So, the North invades. The South cannot stop them. The few U.S. forces that are there are unable to stop them. There's a city called Busan down in this area, and it was a Busan perimeter. The rest of the country had been overrun by the North. UN UN declaration authorized force against North Korea because the North Koreans, or not the North Koreans, because the Russians, the Soviets rather, boycotted the Security Council, so they couldn't vote no. They learned from that mistake. They never did that again. So, MacArthur does at Incheon, does an amphibious assault here, drives inland, cuts off the North Korean army supplies. They collapse and run north, and now it goes the other way. We have U.S. troops on the Yalu River with China. There were a few oopses on our part where American planes fired into China. China used that as a pretext to enter the war on North Korea's side. We were pushed back, and about where the war started is about where the war ended. That's the current armistice line. A ceasefire was called in 1950, and it's still in force today. Technically, North and South Korea are still at war. Technically, we are still at war. It is still just a ceasefire. Not an armistice, nothing else. But it's an armistice that neither side has wanted to seriously break since the end of that war. Questions, comments? Essentially, what happens to North Korea after the Korean War is its economy, like most communist countries, slowly stagnates and begins to collapse. The interesting thing about communism, why it doesn't work as an economic system, is because, let me put it this way. Let's say I'm running a pencil factory. We're hand-making pencils. I know it's ludicrous, but bear with me. And I need you to make 10 pencils an hour, and you to make 10 pencils an hour, and you to make 10 pencils an hour. Okay? And you all get paid the same for 10 pencils an hour. Now, a couple of years go by, and let's say you're only making 8 pencils an hour. You're still both making 10 pencils an hour. You all get paid the same. No difference. What are you going to start doing? You're going to make less pencils, right? And then maybe 4 pencils, and then maybe 3 pencils, and then maybe 1 pencil every other day. And the system was not able to maintain production. So you ran into situations throughout the communist world, such as, like, for example, in East Germany. If you wanted to buy a car, you had to buy a Wartburg. That was the East German car with a 2-stroke gas oil engine. Top speed, 50 mile an hour.
Trayvon?
Yeah, the Trayvon. I'm sorry, the Wartburger was the more expensive one. It had a 4-cylinder gas oil engine. The Trayvon was the cheaper one. Prices comparable to U.S. cars today. And you had to pay in cash up front for your Trayvon. And you waited 10 years. You were given a date 10 years in the future, morning or afternoon, to show up to pick up your car. You had no choice of color, no choice of style, no choice of option, and if you didn't show up, wait another 10 years. Okay? Then you get this thing. It may have been made out of plastic, may have been made out of steel, may have been made out of wood.
We actually saw one that had been in an accident.
Yeah, wood chips.
Wood, the whole hood was just wood crumbled.
Guaranteed that it was made shoddy, of inferior products and inferior workmanship. That was guaranteed. And then once you got your car, you were assigned a gas station. And you were given your ration cards on how much fuel you could have each month. That's how bad the system got. And that's what happened in North Korea. Infrastructure was not maintained. There was no incentive to do so. The regime was getting more out of bullying its population using military force. So what happens is North Korea's infrastructure crumbles, and now the South's GDP is 40 times that of the North. The South is booming. Annual GDP in North Korea is about $1,800 a year. 197th among countries in the world. 18 times higher, rather, than
That's
South
per
Korea.
capita.
Per capita, yeah. That's the per capita. Electric power shuts down at night. You ever seen the pictures of this part of the world from a satellite? You see all this lit up, and China lit up, and Russia lit up. There's this dark area in the middle, and like one light there. Because their electrical grid is so corrupt, so degraded, It can't handle it. Even if they had the fuel, which they do, by the way, they have coal. If they were to fire up the plants, if the plants work, many of them are just abandoned. But even if they got them work, they couldn't get the electricity throughout the country because the grid is so poorly maintained, in such bad shape. So essentially, in the years following the war till now, North Korea economically has been on a steady downward slide. North Korea has been going up.
South Korea.
South Korea, rather. South Korea has been going up, and there's been increasingly a disparity between the two. North Korea has what's called a military-first policy. About 1/3 of its GDP goes into military spending. They have old equipment. The average North Korean pilot will fly in 1 year less than his U.S. counterpart will fly in 1 month. So they have a lot of soldiers. They have a lot of equipment. Most of it is 1960s vintage or newly made versions of 1960s equipment. They don't have many modern anything. The most modern fighter plane they have dates from 1981. It's an old Soviet model. Yes?
If, for example, going back to the problem with the power grid, they were to try to upgrade things, they wouldn't have the money to buy the equipment, and they wouldn't be able to produce it themselves. Is that correct?
Well, North Korea makes almost all of its own armaments, if that's what you mean.
Well, I was thinking
But it's old stuff.
generating stations and power lines and towers and that sort of thing.
It would be yeah, they don't have the resources to do it.
And it would be
At this
antiquated.
point.
Even if they made it, it'd be antiquated. They don't have the technology.
They don't have the technology, they don't have the know-how. The internet is a closed domestic system. The internet does not exist other than a closed domestic system, so it's only government websites, and you can only get onto it with a computer on a desktop, no mobile. They do have 3G service in the cities for foreigners only, not for their own people. Yes?
Would there be a black market going on that?
There is a black market going in some things, yes. Just don't get caught. If you are deemed a criminal, you go to jail for however long or the rest of your life. If you are deemed a political prisoner, you go to a concentration camp and your entire family may join you for possibly forever, slave labor. Can you imagine your grandson or your grandmother doing something and you go to jail with her or him? For however long? Even though you've done absolutely nothing? Welcome to North Korea. Can you imagine being jailed because you don't have your pin on? Welcome to North Korea. If you fail to show up when you are told to a, I think it's called an education center, I'm forgetting the Korean name for it, you go to this little place and there's a picture of Kim Sung-il and Kim Jong-il on the wall, and you must bow to it. Show homage to it. Or again, you go to jail. Welcome to North Korea. If you listen to a broadcast of any kind that did not emanate from North Korea, if you heard anything from China or Russia or South Korea or Ghana for that matter, you will be severely punished. Welcome to North Korea. It is one of the most isolated and brutal dictatorships in the world. So, here, I left you here 20 facts about North Korea. Just like to share those. The country's policy of juche or self-reliance means we do it all ourselves. It's the answer. Cut ourselves off from the rest of the world, we do it all ourselves. Well, anybody who has studied world history knows when you cut yourself off from foreign trade, you have hurt your country's economy.
You're dead.
And that's essentially what happened to North Korea. They went. However, What I just said would put me in jail in North Korea. You do not criticize Juche. You do not criticize the great leader Comrade Kim Il-sung's concept of Juche. Kim Jong-il, he was the guy with the funny haircut. Remember him? Scored a perfect 300 the first time he went bowling. Sank 18 holes and won the first time he played golf. Dropped both games because he couldn't do any better. This is the one with the double rainbow, the swallow coming down, and so there's a cult, what the communists call a cult of personality. Stalin had a cult of personality. You know, where you revere the leader rather than the system or the government. The North Koreans have taken it to a whole different level. Are the Kims deities? Are they quasi-deities? Are they revered leaders? They leave it vague. They leave it vague. The camps, the concentration camps, between 150,000 and 200,000 North Koreans. And up to 40% of the camp prisoners die from malnutrition while doing mining, logging, and agricultural work. Remember, this is a country of famine. This is a country where the adults are about 2 to 3 inches shorter than those in the South due to malnutrition, on average.
Is that a large percentage of the population?
I'm talking overall. The whole population of North Korea is 2 to 3 inches shorter than their South Korean counterparts.
I'm sorry, is the ones in the concentration camp, what percentage of the whole population?
The whole population is 2 to 3% shorter. 2 to 3 inches shorter.
What percentage of the population is in the camps?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me see. What's the population?
25 million.
12 million. Whatever 200,000 is out of 12 million.
Okay.
You can see I didn't major in math. A lot.
On goal at 9, you say 25 million.
Yeah. Only military and government officials can own motor vehicles. The East Germans had it good. At least after 10 years, you could get a car. Sort of. They were really funny to watch. Trabants, after when the wall opened up and Trabants started appearing in the West, which was right around the time shortly before we left Germany, it was a hoot. Because if you had a 4-lane, 6-lane, or 4-lane highway, you go down the road and you're 4 lanes coming the other way. On the far right, you had the Trabant lane. 50 mile an hour, they're like this. Willingness to go faster. Then the second lane was the American lane. 75, 80. The third lane was the German lane. 110, 120. And the fourth lane was the Luftwaffe lane. Air Force. 200 mile an hour. Perfectly legal in rural areas, go as fast as you want, but you never pass on the left. Or you always pass on the left. Never on the right. You get past on the right, your fine is in the thousands of euros. First time. You don't do that in Germany. Anyway, only military and government officials can own a motor vehicle. How about this one, ladies and gents? One of 28 approved haircuts. There is a rumor, currently floating around the intelligence communities, that Kim Jong-un has changed that and that all men will have to wear his hairstyle. And if you've seen him, it looks, buzzsaw on the side, little bit of hair here kind of thing. It's been called the Chinese gangster look by many people in China. Because they find that criminal types kind of like this haircut. Well, this Jong-un likes it, so the rumor is that he is requiring all men to do so. However, that's not been borne out yet in pictures or in reports from people having left the country. There's no official. They just tell the people privately, you do it, and they don't tell the rest of the world anything. So you kind of find out after the fact. So we'll have to wait and see if that's true. But at least under the old rules, the hair of men can go as long as 2 3/4 inches. All legal televisions are pre-tuned to North Korean channels. You can't tune to a South Korean or a Chinese or a Russian channel. They're preset. North Korea does have a missile that has an estimated range of about 4,000 miles. They are testing medium-range missiles. So far, they've had one successful launch that I'm aware of. This border is the most militarized in the world. There are a lot of forces facing each other. At this point in time, it is all South Korean troops facing North Korean troops, to be perfectly honest. As I mentioned before, well, maybe it might be time to...
We had U.S. troops there, don't we?
Yes, we do. We have about a division minus, about 10,000 currently. We have a division headquarters, and I believe 2 brigades now. We used to have a full-up 5-brigade force in South Korea.
What's their role there?
Their role, tripwire.
What?
If North Korea were to invade the South, since we are there, North Korea knows they will be at war with the United States. So they're there as a deterrent. And yes, we do have very detailed plans to defend the South Korean peninsula in the event of war. There are plans for the invasion of Antarctica. Plans for fighting a famine in Mongolia. I mean, you name it. There are plans upon plans upon plans. But the one for Antarctica is one page saying, we need some troops to go down there and just cover these bases and, be very sketchy. Because the odds of doing it's about nil. For Korea, it's a book. Well, or what used to be a book. Now it's, of course, all digital. And they're updated constantly. North Korea knows that. That's called a deterrent, or tripwire. And that's the main reason why we have troops in South Korea. Some military analysts say the real reason why we're there is to keep the South Koreans from going north. Because although the North Korean has a vast number of troops, they don't have the equipment. They have artillery, but they don't have a whole lot of resupply. They run out pretty quick. Those are antiquated pieces of equipment that can easily be destroyed.
What about Zaire? Do they have?
That's the other unknown. It depends on how much the North Korean military really believes what their leaders are telling them. And frankly, we don't know. Because they can't even tell us. I would suspect a significant percent of the population believes it, a significant percent of the population does not, and there are folks in the middle. Because that's true of just about every governmental system. Even if those who are opposed keep their mouths very, very shut.
And because they're so isolated, they don't know that they're worse off than other people.
Exactly. They think they're one of the wealthiest nations in the world. That's what they're told. They're told the South Koreans are in poverty. They say we're living impoverished and then having much better off in North Korea. That's what they're told. Nobody's saying anything different that they're hearing. At least the majority of the population.
And we were in South Korea in 11, I guess it was.
January 11th.
January 11, and it was just amazing. I mean, it is a powerhouse of building, and we were just blown away by the amount of building that's going on in South Korea. There are when we were there in 11, there were 3 bridges going up over the Han River in succession. 3 bridges all at once being put up. So
Near Seoul.
Near Seoul, so you could get to the airport more easily. But it was just amazing the amount of infrastructure.
The Incheon
building
airport
that
was brand
going
new
on.
at that time, and they were just putting in additional road links and rail links to the airport.
Does South Korea feel that their military is adequate, or do they think
They
should
rely
be
on their
adequate?
partnership with us,
Yes.
officially. Partially because North Korea does have a nuclear capability, a very limited one, but it does. South Korea does look to that partnership, very much so. There is an integrated command structure. The Iraq Army, Republic of Korea Army of the South, and U.S. forces have a joint command structure so that we can very seamlessly work together in the event of invasion.
And unlike with the Iraqis, it works. you know, are thinking us trying to train up Iraqis and all. The South
Yeah.
Koreans are much more.
The desire of the South to remain free is strong.